And welcome to the Bruin Bible. This is Will Decker, your host, and we are so lucky to have a special guest in the house. We have Ilana Limon Romero, the deputy sports editor of the LA Times. Ilana, what is going on?
I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be joining you and be talking UCLA football.
We are honored to have you on, and I know you just took over the position in February. You worked at the Orlando Sentinel for 16 years. Is that correct?
That is correct. Wow, that's a long time. Yes.
16 years? No, that's very impressive. And you're originally from El Paso, Texas, correct?
Correct.
I want to know what your sports fandom is like. Who did you grow up rooting for? And did you have a college football team growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up in El Paso. The Dodgers were really big there. It was a big Dodger town. Fernando Valenzuela just took over barnstorming for us. And so we got KTLA in our area. So we also got some broadcasts directly. There was just a lot of things there. There's a big Los Angeles to El Paso connection. I'm not sure if everybody in Los Angeles knows that, but people in El Paso certainly do. So there was that. I must confess that the Dallas Cowboys were the big football team there, the big NFL team. It just is what it is. I'm sorry. I know it's a cross I bear. I inherited it by birth, not by any other way. And then also, the San Antonio Spurs obviously are extraordinarily popular there. In terms of colleges, the local team, University of Texas at El Paso, very scrappy. They were good in college basketball as I was coming up. I got to go to Tim Hardaway's basketball camps when I was a kid. So that was very formative. Don Haskins was still the coach. If you've seen the movie Glory Road, that was a big thing. So that's a big part of it. I've seen a lot of losing. I've seen a lot more misery than a lot of other college football fans, I think, by virtue of that. I somewhat betrayed my family by going to the University of New Mexico, which was a rival of UTEP. So, again, great basketball school. A lot of basketball in our background, more than college football, but really enjoyed all sports and love that, curious about everything and love that opportunity. And it's hard not to love basketball in the area that I grew up in just because of, as I mentioned, Don Haskins and the 1966 national championship team that was pretty iconic in our area. And then going to the University of New Mexico, watching amazing games in the pit. It's just a phenomenal place. Lute Olson hated it, but everyone else loved it. And it was a joy to watch that and to see that magic unfold, to see just crowds going crazy in New Mexico. Also, women's basketball was huge. I covered the University of New Mexico women's basketball team for a while. They averaged 11,000 fans per game when I was there. Yeah, and they were loud. So, and the men were averaging 18,000, 18. It was just a ravenous appetite for that. So it great points of entry. And of course, we mentioned that I was in Orlando. So the heart of the Southeast Conference down there, and a lot of, there's only a few seasons in Florida. There's college football season, and then spring football, and then recruiting. Those are the seasons as far as most people are concerned. So that was great exposure. So that's a little bit about how I came up.
Well, Ileana, I've got two things to bring up with that. First and foremost, we had Dan Wetzel, the author, a couple weeks back, who actually wrote the book Glory Road, which is really cool. We got to talk about that. One of my all-time favorite movies related to sports. Such a great story about the first 5 all-starting African-American team to not only make it to the championship, but they beat Kentucky, which was the powerhouse back then. Such an awesome story. Don Haskins, the head coach there. And I actually got my start in women's basketball, too. I worked for the University of Memphis. We did not have 11,000 fans in the stands. I can say that. So that was kind of whoa, that's insane. We had maybe 1,100 at most, on a good game. But very similar backgrounds. It's really cool to hear. You're massive sports fans, so I love talking sports with anyone I could talk to. And we had a huge UCLA game this past weekend, Ileana. I felt like this was a game that may have saved the season for UCLA in a lot of ways, because Fresno State comes into the house, kind of kills the momentum of the LSU game, And then they go to Stanford, a team that has beaten the Bruins 12 of the last 13 times. And it came down to a guy we've been waiting on to make a big play, a big moment, and he got it. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, affectionately referred to as DTR, coming back on the field after that insane shoulder injury and making the game-winning touchdown, or essentially the game-sealing touchdown, into the left end zone to Kyle Phillips. Give me a breakdown on DTR's performance, because it was one of the best in recent memory of UCLA football.
Phenomenal. I think there are so many things that you looked at the roster for UCLA coming into the season and you're like, that's a team. That's a good team. That's a lot of experience. That's a lot of depth. That's a lot of opportunities. You could see the circumstances in the past that may have happened that might have prevented them from being nearly as effective. COVID year, shortened access in terms of time, practice, other things. But that you've got talent. I've got Eric Sondheimer in my ear telling me that there's a running back who's going to take over the world. And he was right. There absolutely was. But to me, I remember Bill Plaschke asking me before the LSU game, like, what do you think? And he's like, I think they're going to win it. And I said, I think so, but DTR is going to have to make some throws. And I don't know. I don't know yet. I think he's super talented. Yeah. He can run. He can do a lot of different things, but can he make those throws on time? Well, turns out I didn't quite have the right opponent of where he would be called upon to do that in the same way. But I just think that really he's showed so much of himself in that game, and just really showed so much to everyone. Proved not just the toughness. I know we talk a ton about the toughness because it's really obvious, and that's obviously transformational. I mean, I was stunned by what he was able to do and what he was able to will himself to do. But it's not just that. It's that as the injury was clearly flaring up, as he was having difficulty, he got better. The precision passing, and I think part of it was probably I cannot run. I have to deliver this ball instantly. I cannot get hit. And he did it. And that was just so impressive and something that we haven't seen. So he answered that question a few games later than I thought he was going to have to. Can he answer the call? Can he be that person to take a good team and make it great? And so far, he absolutely responded.
He absolutely responded, is right. Fourth quarter comes, Stanford is driving. They get that huge touchdown. The very next offensive play, he hits Phillips for that 75-yard touchdown across the middle, which kind of solidified the lead coming back to UCLA, gave them all the confidence in the world. And, like you said, he's such a talented player. I mean, this is a guy whose ceiling is so high with what he can do at the college football level. Great deep ball for all that matters. It's a great runner, dual threat quarterback type of thing. He's the type of guy, I used to play NCAA football growing up. He's the type of guy you would create because you can move him outside the pocket, get some extra yards, and he can throw the football downfield. He's a really talented player, but he's kind of had some of those bonehead mistakes in the past, and he's kind of, really kind of not had his moment. He was such a highly touted recruit coming here, especially with Chip Kelly being the head coach. We thought maybe we could see some heights. This was his moment, and I think this could be a moment that turns the season for the team. It just felt like old UCLA was going to collapse in that moment, and they rose to the challenge, and their quarterback was the toughest guy in the field, coming in with an injured shoulder, delivering the pass to seal it. I mean, it was just, you couldn't have written a better script for that particular game for UCLA. So I was very excited to see that as a UCLA football fan. He was awesome. Another guy we got to talk about is Kyle Phillips. This guy, I think, has been underappreciated in the Pac-12. I mean, he's led UCLA in catches all 3 of his first years, and he's leading them again in his senior year. He's off to a great start. He has 16 catches on the year, 294 yards, and 5 touchdowns, 2 of which coming against Stanford. Kind of give me your assessment on Kyle Phillips, because he doesn't get talked enough about in the Pac-12, but he's a real primetime performer.
Absolutely. I think it's just the run game and the dynamic defense really kind of distract. And then the questions around the quarterback are always going to draw your attention. I think getting back to DTR, it was just the idea of him not overthinking probably played a big role. You don't have enough time to think so much. So you're just showcasing the best first instinct. And hopefully that unlocks something for UCLA and for him, because that was a game changer. And your first instinct should be the receiver you found. Should absolutely be find that guy as much as you can. And There were some acrobatic plays for him to really deliver. I mean, the ball was put in a position that he could get to, but those were some really good catches. Those were some really important things, and that's someone who's developed some trust. I mean, I think I can think of a handful of times in the past where he's not been put in the best position, where he's been left vulnerable to potentially some really brutal hits. And he's put himself out there every step of the way. I don't see a reason that you can't look at this quarterback and think like, yeah, this is somebody who should be talked about more in the Pac-12. You're absolutely right. He does all the right things, and he's had to do it quietly so far, but I just have to think that if they continue this progress, if they continue at this rate, that those accolades will come this season, that opportunity will come, especially with what we're seeing in the rest of the conference.
I totally agree. And the connection they have there is something special. I'd like to see a little bit more Greg Dulcich action. I think he is such a talented tight end, especially after last season, the game he had against LSU. He did make some big catches in this game, 3 catches for 45 yards. But, boy, it's like having a Ferrari in the garage and just not taking it out. Like, Dulcich, to me, is an NFL tight end, and UCLA has been so good at producing those in recent years. Devin Asiasi drafted by the Patriots. Caleb Wilson drafted by the New York Giants. I mean, they're producing NFL talent level tight ends. This guy might be the best of those 3. I just want to see them take the top off with Dulcich. But the Kyle Phillips DTR combination is such a fun one to watch. And, one I don't feel like is being talked about enough. Pivoting to another offensive position player, Zach Charbonnet. I mean, we were excited to get him at UCLA. I don't think anyone could have imagined be this good. Michigan's loss was Westwood's gain. He had another big performance, 118 yards on the ground, a touchdown, coming off of kind of an off game. He only had 6 carries against Fresno State, which was kind of a head-scratching move, but he was back in rhythm against a big-time Pac-12 opponent. Give me your thoughts on Charbonnet. He has been awesome for the Bruins so far.
Incredible. And I think there's only one person who I knew coming in who absolutely said he's going to be the most valuable player of that LSU game, and that was Eric Sondheimer, the Los Angeles Times high school sports reporter, who saw him at the high school level, saw him make some phenomenal plays, and really told Ben Bolch and myself, like, this guy's coming. Like, just look out. This is going to be an incredible opportunity. And it was sure, like, okay, against Hawaii, we're like, yeah, sure, okay, no problem. That's an opponent that we think you can run over, but to do so and to continue to do so every week is really impressive. Hard to say what exactly happened in the one loss and the limited carries, but obviously he's back very much in part of that rotation, and you think that he'll be a huge factor for them. I think if you're looking for more out of the tight end position, you have to be encouraged by that 2-minute drill that we saw unfold against Stanford and how much he was able to be targeted as a quick receiver threat. Like, I just think the confidence could have built over that. And like, it doesn't have to just go to Zach. It can go to other people and can just continue to grow. In terms of his ceiling individually, like, you talk about someone he's getting those accolades. Like, people know who he is. He's going to continue to run the ball exceptionally if all goes according to plan. I think there's no question that he's going to put up some really special numbers. He has a talent. He has a potential. And the story of why he came back, like, it just meant a lot for him to have that opportunity and to be closer to home during the pandemic, in addition to the fact that, for whatever reason, I don't know what happened in Michigan, but I'm really surprised that did not pan out for itself, but it's certainly UCLA's game.
From what I heard, he had kind of a falling out with the offensive coordinator. A new coordinator came to join Harbaugh's staff from Alabama.
I mean, I guess I heard that. I just don't understand it when there's that much talent is the question.
I mean, seeing what we're seeing right now, I don't think anyone could plausibly understand what went wrong there. But, I mean, we're not complaining. We're happy to have him there. It's been awesome. A couple more, guys coming out of the woodworks too. Cam Brown, the Texas A&M transfer. He had a huge game against Fresno State. Made a, one catch for 16 yards, but just having that extra weapon for DTR, I think, is big. Kaz Allen's made some big catches on the outside. Notably, the Hawaii game, he had the touchdown catch. He had a big catch against LSU on that first drive for UCLA as well. So the offense is clicking. I think this is one of the better run games in the country with the line that we have. Sean Ryan, this guy's going to be a top 3 round pick in the NFL. I believe that. He's been starting as a left tackle in the Pac-12 since the day he got on campus. Alec Anderson is almost as good on the other side. And we haven't even brought up Britton Brown, who was very good as well against Stanford. 8 carries, 66 yards. Do you think this is a top 5 run game in the entire country like I do, because I believe with DTR throwing in what he can do, I think this team is pretty amazing on the ground.
Yeah. No, I think there's no question there. I think what DTR sold to in terms of showing what he could do will just force people to not be able to key in on it as much, hopefully, from their perspective in terms of its productivity. But really, it starts with that line, and that line being really trained in a way where they're interchangeable, and where we saw Sam Mazzarano, come out, unfortunately, really, really tough for him, fighting back from injury, and then, having to go out in one of the first games where he has like a formidable opportunity after going through all this stuff, but to not miss a beat and to continue to provide that protection, it's a lot. I mean, with that, plus the experienced, backs, like they're going to be formidable for sure. I think taking care of DTR, like, I think it's great that he came back. I think it's great that he's okay, but like, I think you're going to have to continue to watch that and ask him to, be thoughtful about how many times he puts himself in danger, because you have so many others who can carry that load, because it can be so evenly distributed. But I think, yeah, it is a formidable group. You think about across the country, some of the old favorites that have traditionally run the ball well are struggling. And I think it's a good sign. Yeah, it's a tremendous lineup. It's something that people have flagged and noticed. I mean, I think Kirk Herbstreit on a national level was one of the first right out of the gate to say, like, look out, this team has what you need.
We really do. And you throw that all with a guy in Chip Kelly who is a genius at designing the run game. You think of those Oregon teams, LaMichael James, Jonathan Stewart, guys that were dominant college football running backs. And you kind of add all those elements together, and it's like, we thought this could be the year, and it's starting to trend that way. A big win like Stanford does that. I do want to pivot to the somewhat negative side of the ball. The secondary has had its issues, and it really showed itself against Stanford. 3 huge touchdowns from Tanner McKee, who has stepped in there as the Stanford quarterback and has been phenomenal. Secondary has not looked good, but I will go with a positive. The run defense has been special this year. This is a team that is ranking 6th nationally in run defense. Stanford has always been able to run the football in the Pac-12. You think of guys like Toby Gerhardt, you think of Christian McCaffrey, different guys like that. They held a Stanford team to 67 yards on the ground, which was very, very impressive. Let's talk about the run game and the pass game. What are your thoughts?
So it's interesting. Stanford's stats went down for much of the game, their stat machine that would record that stuff. And so it was largely to their benefit. Ben Bulch and I were talking about that a bit. Like, the numbers were quite bad for the run offense for Stanford, and that defense was formidable. I think what I have seen so far is some strong first halves in general out of the defense. And you start to see the secondary really have some trouble in the second half. So I think that's going to be an area that they're really going to need to continue to work to just tighten up, build confidence over the course of the year. If you want to be a conference championship team, like, that's going to have to be, they're going to need progress there. They're going to just need to continue to build and develop, because I do think that early in the game against Stanford, it was like, oh, they've tightened up coverage. They figured out, like, there's not like acres of space to work with, but sure enough, when things started to heat up in the second half, it obviously, the Stanford quarterback was able to pick his way through quite a bit, and that was problematic. It was like, oh no, here we go again. This is exactly what it's going to be like. Another week of having an early lead, feeling like you really dominated on both sides of the ball, and then all of a sudden you're on your heels. So obviously the offense did the defense some favors, but I think there's still some good stuff to build on. And
definitely some good stuff.
When you have a team like this that has so much talent in so many different positions, and as you mentioned, a formidable run defense, that buys you some time. That buys time for your secondary to mature, to find its footing, to get its ground, and to have confidence that the offense is going to help. And there is no greater gift for a defense, any part of it, than a phenomenal run game. Because if you're rushing attack and keep everyone off the field for that long, you're doing great. You're going to be in a great position. You're going to be fresher. You're going to be able to stand up and do a bit more. So I'm sure that that's part of the formula. But, you hope when you look at teams and you're like, can they win a championship? What can they do? Like, it's okay if there are issues early in the season, but you just need to see growth. You need to see progress. And I think it's hard to recognize it, but I do think in the first half there was some progress from the secondary. It just didn't sustain.
Definitely. And I think they're going to get a lot more help. Quentin Lake is practicing again, which is a welcome sign for Bruins fans. This guy, he is so awesome, but it's so frustrating because he cannot stay healthy. Not his fault at all. But this guy, I mean, he's got NFL talent written all over him. If he could just stay healthy, I mean, he'll probably be an all Pac-12 performer if he just misses this one game against Fresno State. The plays that come to mind was LSU is early in the third quarter. It was kind of the decision time if the Bruins were for real in this game or not. He broke up 2 passes from Max Johnson on one drive. That was like, these are incredible plays. This guy, he has what it takes. He's going to be there on Sunday. He's guarding LSU wide receivers who continually put some of the best ones in the league. So Quinn Lake will be coming back, which is great. Also, just the pass rush in general, I was able to, watch a little bit of last year. And boy, I mean, they were fantastic in the pass rush last year, and they're building upon it. Guys like Mitchell Agude has been awesome. I know he's got a little bit of an injury right now. We're hoping he comes back. But, Kale Ayau coming from, Alabama, that's a big pickup for this defense. Caleb Johnson really hasn't even clicked. He led the team in sacks last year with 5.5. So you have all these guys just coming, sending, 7-8 guys in the box. And the guy that really stood out against Stanford, who's also one of the team leaders, Quantrez Knight, 7 tackles. He had a tackle and a half for a loss, half of a sack. I mean, he was sensational. And from what I'm hearing, he's the team leader on defense. What's your thoughts on Quantrez Knight?
I mean, it's tremendous when you can have that balanced leadership and when you can have that person on that side of the ball really directing things. I think what was big in the second half, as much as we talk about, DTR kind of leading that stirring comeback and the quick strike attack and pushing back, was that you didn't see the confidence of the defense seem to fold. They may not have gotten the stops that you wanted. You didn't get everything that you needed in the second half necessarily, and you did need to lean on that offense, but you saw that leadership on the sideline. You saw that leadership in the field. You saw, several different players, pushing, and there are some trademark signs of hands on hips and looking around and not quite being into it. And those were not there. So I think, again, that those are things that they can build on. And it is probably a testament to the depth and the veteran experience of this team and these transfers that we've highlighted, that we're not talking as much about some of the players who are injured or who haven't emerged yet or matched the numbers that they put up last year, because they just have a lot of answers. There's a lot of different people, but I credit that leadership on that side of the ball, because it would be easy to be really defeated by the way the Fresno State loss unfolded and then the way the start of that second half was going. But they were into what the offense was doing. They were pushing for them and they were pushing each other. And you just didn't see a lot of surrender. And I think the tone, from past UCLA games, we talked about my background, like where I came from and stuff. Like, I would come off of my shift. We had an earlier deadline on the East Coast, and I would watch Pac-12 after dark. Like, that's what was still on. When I came home from work, I was like, oh, there's still games. Like, because when you're working, you're busy. You're focused on just a handful, but this was like the most I could watch. And so, yeah. So seeing this shift from UCLA, I do feel like I unwittingly preparing for this new job and this new opportunity of watching all of these games the last couple of years. So I have seen so many of them with probably more focus than anything else I had, because, again, I had just finished work and I was no longer paying attention to a ton of other stuff. It is the secret sauce. If you like college football, Pac-12 After Dark is phenomenal for you. It is just frustrating because for a lot of folks that, like, a lot of people don't stay up and don't kind of take into account how good different teams within the league are. But I think, like I said, this had all the ingredients to be oh no, here we go again. And it just wasn't. And so you talk about leadership on that defensive side of the ball, even though they didn't deliver all the plays that you'd be looking for, I really do think that they also didn't give signs of complete surrender. They kept pushing and they kept pushing the offense.
They did a great job. Pac-12 After Dark is a phenomenal show for anyone that doesn't watch it. Check it out. It comes around like 10 o'clock p.m. Pacific time after the last Pac-12 game, has all the recaps. They do a phenomenal job there. Let's keep it with the Pac-12. Arizona State this week. This is going to be a tougher game than I think a lot of people realize. Herm Edwards is a phenomenal coach. Jaden Daniels has a very similar kind of career path and skill set to DTR. That's going to be a really fun game between two very athletic quarterbacks. Great defense from Arizona State. They have one of the more experienced secondaries in the entire country. Coming into this season, they had 4 guys in the secondary with at least 25 starts to their credit. One of those being former 5-star USC corner Jack Jones. What are you thinking about this ASU game? Do you think the Bruins can keep the momentum rolling in the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, I think so. I think just because of all of the things that we've highlighted so far, if you have that strong of a run game, if you have the home field advantage, if you have a run defense that's that formidable, even though you do have a dynamic playmaker and a quarterback, you have a defense that has trained against one. Presumably when they're going 1-versus-1, you're going to see that kind of a threat from DTR during the course of the offseason. So they're more accustomed than most might be to that kind of a threat. But I do agree, this is a formidable matchup, and this is a surprise, I think, for many for how they thought the Pac-12 might play out. This is a very high-stakes game, and this is a huge opportunity for UCLA because it is at home. Just having that big bump that can come from it, it's turned into a much bigger one than I would have thought at the beginning of the season in terms of what kind of impact and what kind of momentum it can have for the team. I think UCLA has certainly got a lot of strengths going in, but if you don't stay sharp, if you don't pay attention to some of the things that crept up against Fresno State, you're going to have big problems. So there definitely is Arizona State's formidable in all the ways that you highlighted. And I do think their coach, there's been some challenges, some NCAA issues and some other things, but there's no question of the motivational leadership and the desire to win from that sideline. So I think, they write it out. They think that it's, just all on them coming together. And that's, like I said, always dangerous, super athletic team, lots of different opportunities to hurt UCLA if you're not sharp. But I like the momentum and the opportunity that UCLA has in the situation, still knowing all that.
I completely agree. And I'll take it a step further. I think the team that wins this game, given what we've seen from Utah early and from USC, I think this is whoever wins this game is going to take the lead in the Pac-12 South. Yeah. I fully believe that. And this is UCLA's chance to get back on a national stage, keep building that momentum after this LSU win, after this come from behind victory over, Stanford. I mean, it's been a year of kind of, getting the skeletons out of the closet for UCLA, so to speak. They hadn't won an out of conference game with Chip Kelly coming into this year. Even last year, the team had a losing record, but you could see the talent there. All 5 games they had lost were by a combined 15 points. I mean, that is insane to lose by that few of points. You're in every game at that point. So this is their time. They're going to have to rise to the occasion. I'm going to give you a score prediction. I'm going 38-24 UCLA. What do you think about that?
I think it's a good score. I think that seems reasonable. I think it might be a little tighter, but I think that's a reasonable pick. I think there's no question that there's nothing I see from Arizona State's defense that makes me think that UCLA can't score that many, that they can't control the ball for that long, and there's also enough of a threat on Arizona State's side to put up that much points. I think most odds makers probably call it a little tighter, but we'll see. That's the home field edge you're giving them, and that's fine.
Got to give them the home field edge. You got a score prediction for me?
Yeah, like I said, a little bit tighter. I think 38's a really solid number, but I think it's probably going to be, I just think it's probably going to be really just within a touchdown. I don't think it's going to be quite that big. So it could even be as a high scoring one. I just think that second half that defense still needs to show me more to feel like they're going to hold off that late surge. But I do think it's a UCLA one. So maybe we'll go with. Maybe it's a 38-34, like really tight, but like a high scoring one. But I do think that UCLA wins. I think there's a chance that score stretches out, but there's just some things, like I said, you need to see from the secondary in the second half where they just sustain it. They haven't yet.
The secondary is going to be tested once again by Jaden Daniels and some of those highly recruited wide receivers out at Arizona State. A couple of them are sophomores. They haven't really hit just yet, but this could very well be the week that they do. I want to pivot to the crosstown rival. To the much delight of Bruins fans, USC got blown out again by Oregon State. Keaton Slovis, 3 interceptions. It's looking like Jackson Dart, whenever he gets back, may be in control to take over that starting job. What has been going wrong for the Trojans in South Central?
Well, everything has been going wrong for them. I think it starts with, the decision that they had to make, obviously, with their coaching change. That is really bad when you have to make that 2 games in. I mean, I'm not telling anybody anything that's news, but it's really unfortunate for a team and really destabilizing when your program is the first to make a change in the entire country. Like that's really rough. Couldn't that change have been made in the offseason? Couldn't you have put this team on better footing? Because there's a lot of talent. There's just definitely a huge confidence issue. There's a huge connection issue on all sides of the ball. I looked at this roster and said, they're good. And they had a softer schedule. They had potential to do a lot more things than we even thought that maybe UCLA might be able to, just because, again, the softer schedule, the things that were really going in their favor, the number of veterans coming back, the transfers that they had as well. Things that all should have worked but didn't because of some issues about that connectiveness within the roster, some issues with the accountability and the pushing each other and the challenging each other. Those things all sort of fractured. And like I said, I think it's really tough. I think in not making that call in the offseason put them at a huge disadvantage, because they come into this now. You want to rally around an interim coach, and USC has a rich tradition of rallying around interim coaches and doing quite well. But this was a tall ask. This was such a huge thing to ask a coach to do. And I think you had a quarterback who was vowing to come in. Keaton Slovis was vowing to come into this season, promising that it would be better. He went to camps. He focused on sort of changing his throwing motion and getting his confidence back. But that is something that you need to kind of really build momentum on early in the season. You need to get up there, and it just wasn't there. Your lines kind of betray the chemistry of your team, in my opinion, and the lines haven't been able to hold up nearly as well. And it sort of shows. If your bond isn't great, your lines are not going to perform at that great level, then your players are running for their lives a bit with the ball in their hands. It puts you in a bad position. Your secondary is just gassed. There's just a lot of things that happen if you don't, play well up front. And that is where sometimes the foundation of a football team really is exposed, not only because of the chemistry thing I talked about, but also because that's not a quick fix. Even if you get a transfer, junior college transfer or a grad transfer, that's an area where you need time. You need sort of fundamentals, and you need to develop, and your program is not healthy if you're not developing a strong enough line that can continue to grow and evolve. So they don't have that. You've got a quarterback who was shaking on the confidence, felt like he got things back, so was really committed and driven coming into the season. But then you get enough hits, you get a neck injury, which is really scary. Of all the injuries for a player, a neck injury is kind of, even when you're fine, it's terrifying. So then you come back into a position and you start hearing footsteps again. It's a lot. So they have a lot of work to do. It's going to be really difficult for them, extremely challenging, which is, like I said, but they have talent. And that's something that people have to be careful about, because as much fun as some folks might be having at their downward spiral, they'll always bring their best for a rivalry game. So that's still coming on the schedule. That's still going to be a thing. And I think it would be a misnomer to think that they don't have talent. It's just right now they don't have that connectivity to make it all come together.
And UCLA fans, we know that. I mean, at least the smart ones, we're not taking anything lightly. When that SC games comes, we're going to have to put that on the field and prove it. But you made a great point. I think for most football fans, I think the quarterback is the most important position on the field. But for me, the next position group that is of most importance is the offensive and defensive lines. They dictate up front. They give you time. You could be an excellent quarterback, but if you don't have time back there, it's basically useless. And They lost arguably one of the better offensive linemen I've seen in my time covering the Pac-12, and Elijah Vera-Tucker, the first rounder to the Jets. They have not been able to find anything close to a replacement for that. And it does give me some sort of confidence if the line does stay the same up front, given how we've seen UCLA blitz the quarterback in recent years. So, I mean, Max Johnson was running for his life. Hawaii, granted, that's Hawaii. They were running for their lives too. But I'm very excited to see that matchup with the defense that we bring and the holes that they just frankly have on the offensive line. Oregon State, here's a crazy stat for you. Oregon State got their first victory in the Coliseum since 1960. That is unreal. That is – I'm pretty sure it's the JFK presidency was the last time that they got it.
Eisenhower, I think.
Even crazier, even further back.
Yeah, I mean, the stats that were showing in FS1 were very popular to screenshot and share. Like Elvis had the #1 hit. Like it just the things were ridiculous. But it was definitely further back than JFK. I could be wrong on Eisenhower, but I think that's correct. It's been a very long time, and it was really crushing. I think just for them to show how far back it is, and that I think there was a team that came in that was hungry. So I think that's a good reminder. There's always a lot of concern and hand-wringing over like, where does the Pac-12 stand nationally? How do we get into the playoff? How do we do all these things? But I think there also should be some appreciation for the fact that like, you can't sleep on any of the teams in this league. Like they do have the potential to come up and bite you. So I think this was a long time coming, one that they were really pushing for and one they took great pride in.
No, I completely agree. We've had an awesome time. I want to ask you the last question, the one that everyone's talking about in Los Angeles. Who do you think would be an ideal candidate for USC moving forward? Because I've got a few names that I really think would be, scary for UCLA fans, frankly.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I think they're going to try to take advantage of the opportunity of having more time. I'm not sold on an NFL coach. I know that, there's some opportunities. There's some who could come through, but I just think they're looking for someone who's going to connect and who's going to hit. I think Luke Fickell is very popular in terms of just the connections to the athletic director, what he's been able to develop and what he's been able to do that's been proven. And I sort of do like the idea of someone coming up who's had to build something, who's had to turn something around, because I do think as much as USC is a premier job, it's a tremendous job. This is very much a building situation. And I think they're going to have to go with that and go in that direction. I don't think you'll see any of the retired coaches who have been surfaced. I don't see those like, you never believe a denial until it's like really true, because a no can become a yes at any point. But really, I don't see those being a fit and rescuing the program or having the passion or desire to make that happen. I don't see Urban Meyer coming back because I think he's going to need a rest after whatever happens in Jacksonville. And so I really do think it is sort of, James Franklin and I think Luke Fickell are probably among the two that I look at the most and say, I could see that happening and I could see them making the most of the opportunity. But who are your names? I'm very curious. I'm asking everyone their names as well.
The big one that we discussed, and I swear to God, this got kind of blown up on TV a couple of times after Reggie Bush mentioned it. I think if you brought Deion Sanders, granted, you have to get coordinators. If you brought Deion Sanders to LA, we're talking prime time. I mean, he is the king of cool to anyone that's a football fan. You're a Cowboys fan. He was a star defensive back for you guys. Every football player and fan alike knows who this guy is. If he comes into your living room, I mean, it's a very hard chance some of these guys are going to turn that down. I think for what LA is built upon, that is star power, getting people in the seats, Deion Sanders would be a home run hire. Granted, they have to figure out a lot of things. He's only coached college football 1 year, and he'd have to really kind of get some really top-notch coordinators, to be honest with you. But I think as the head man of your program, that just fits LA to a T. I mean, honestly, James Franklin is probably my number 2 in that conversation. Yeah. Just being able to see what he's been able to do. He got Vanderbilt to a competitive program. That is very hard to do. Yeah. I know you're in SEC country. That team is garbage when you're out there in Orlando.
Yep.
And then he's done a really respectable job at Penn State. If you're able to get that guy, he's really kind of built back a couple programs there. So Franklin would be an ideal hire. Fickell, I mean, it's no shame that he's third. He's been fantastic. All these fans have wanted Urban Meyer for a couple of years now at least. Fickell was a defensive coordinator under Urban Meyer, and he's built up Cincinnati. That might be the closest you're going to get to him. He has the connection to the athletic director you mentioned. So I think Franklin and Fickell probably are more realistic options. But if you really want to tilt it, college football on its head, give Deion Sanders a call. Because, boy, I mean, even as a UCLA fan, that would be so much fun to watch that year in and year out.
So, okay, look, I coming from Florida, he was obviously huge in the state, and we've had a lot of exposure and time with him. He's coached some All-Star games. He's got some challenges. I think if you're concerned about getting the program on stable footing, which I think is definitely an issue, there's been talk about, not enough accountability, not enough discipline, maybe being too nice and too forgiving about some things. And I think Dion doesn't have all the logistics down yet from what I have seen so far in the start of his tenure. There's some different things. He does have the splash, no doubt. That splash is coming. Those recruits are coming. You bring in the staff, sure, but I still think that there's like some execution issues and some confidence with that. And I think if you are a booster who already watched a season just fall apart and feel like the special pedigree that the Coliseum is supposed to afford, just a mess, booze and just empty stands and just the worst version of what you could possibly see, like you're going to want someone who's going to bring some more of that stability back. And I think that's where that theory is a little tricky. I mean, it's not impossible. It's certainly, he brings a lot of great things. I just think it's a big jump and it's a tough one when the school just, they need to win on that hire. They absolutely need someone who is capable of bringing everything together and making the most of all the resources that are available and all the talent pool and everything else. And like I said, it would be fun. No doubt about that. That would be fun.
It would be great. Well, Ileana, I had such an awesome time. Thank you so much for coming on. Bruin by Brown.